Hello, America. This is the Daily Answer. Mark Dunagan, your host. I grew up in a small town in Oregon. I think the population was around 5,000 people. All of our schools, particularly the lower level schools, were named after poets. So there was Eugene Field, Robert Frost that went in as a true middle school, but I missed the cutoff for that. I was one class too late. And then Mark Twain would have been the junior high school. I had a friend who lived when I was in elementary school, and the elementary school was like downtown, right downtown, between the two main drags going in and out of Silverton. Had a friend who lived across the street from the school, and I thought that was always cool. Like, kind of envied kids who had a home like right in town or right around the school. They could just walk home. Also, they could walk downtown easily, like down the Fish's Bakery or the 88-cent store, Western Auto, Chuck's Sporting Goods, like 1 minute walk, and you could be down on the toy aisle of some of those stores. Now, as was true at the time and still today, a number of the families that started out in town, eventually as the kids got a little older, usually by junior high school, and I had a couple of friends that this would have been true. Their fathers were, making good money. They were advancing in their careers. And then they would move out of town, get an acre or a couple of acres and build a home. You might say their dream home out in the country. And that happened with this family too. They moved out on Silver Creek, right on the river. The only downside, there were two downsides, was during the wintertime, the river would flood. And so they would have to sandbag the banks so the water would not come into the daylight basement of the home. And so they had to fight that every winter. And then they had a pretty steep driveway, and you come up out of the driveway, and then you were on a road where people are going like 55 miles an hour. And, you had to come up, and especially I had a 4-speed Volkswagen. And so you almost had to come up and do a quick California stop and then go because you just didn't want to sit on that incline and, let the clutch out at the wrong moment and kill the engine. And there you are on a steep bank. Those were the two things that I was not a big fan about. But the house had a number of things that houses at that time they started putting in there of new construction. One would be kind of like a game room. And I remember our neighbors next to us in Silverton put a game room above their garage that had like a ping pong table and a pool table and, had a couch. And it's interesting. There's nothing new under the sun. I have lived long enough to see the advent of the man cave, but there have always been man caves. I remember my cousins in Milwaukee in their basement. Basically, it was a man cave because there was a workbench down there. There were tools. There were heads of deer that had been shot. There was a pool table. And for all practical purposes, it was a man cave. I remember one of the neighbors in the neighborhood I lived in, Silverton. He worked from home. He was an insurance agent, like an independent agent, and he had a man cave. He had a room that had a bear rug with a bear that had its mouth open, that he had shot, a big black bear. He had his desk. He had some hunting trophies on the wall and things like that. And for all practical purposes, that was a man cave. So there's really nothing new under the sun of kind of the man cave or the what you might say the entertainment room where people go in and watch movies or television or things like that. Those were things that were there in my childhood as well. Now, over the years, I would go and spend the night at the home of my friends. And I never spent a night at the home of this particular friend that lived across from the elementary school, but there were some other friends I had. I was not a big fan of the sleepover because usually I was the last one asleep, and I would be there in a strange home with strange smells and strange sounds, looking up at the ceiling at like midnight, unable to go to sleep. And so that was really never fun. I would be the last one to go to sleep, and all the other kids could go to sleep, and then I would hear them snoring or talking in their sleep or whatever. So I really did not enjoy that whole process. But I think it was a good experience. It's a good experience for a child to go in and see how, and just kind of see other homes, even if you don't spend the night or not. There were certainly friends I had that they they received more presents and maybe even better presents for Christmas than I did. And I would have a good Christmas. But there were certain friends like, wow, they really got a lot, or they got all the kind of the sought after high end stuff. But that's good. That's good for you to see that, because there's somebody always out there who's going to have more than you have. And you need to come to terms with that and also realize your blessings. I learned not to envy that, because a lot of times in families where that was happening, there was a downside, like eventually there was a divorce. And my parents never did divorce. And so I benefited from that good, stable home life. I remember going and seeing a particular friend in probably junior high, or what would be viewed as middle school today. And there was mom and there was a sister and there was no dad. And I felt confused about that. Like, well, where's dad? Where's the man of the house? Where's the father of the house? And why isn't the father here? That seems like a very strange concept for me when I was around 12 years old. There was something didn't seem right about that. There's no man here. There's no man in this house. There's no father that this young man has. And so I tried to, see the areas where this is interesting. He has maybe more toys or etc. A bigger room, or sometimes some of these kids would have a room with a workbench where they could work on a model, and it was a large room. It was bigger than the room I had, but at the same time, I tried to appreciate the blessings I had at my home, and one of them was, in spite of all the things that I saw in other people's homes. And I went into homes that had shag carpet and color television and a remote control changer, and where there were Snickers bars and little glass canisters throughout the house that you could have candy anytime you wanted. There was the one thing that none of these homes had better than my home. And I think one would be the security of mom and dad are there. Mom and dad are in for the long term. Mom and dad are there to stay. And none of these homes had better meals than my home did. I mean, my mom could really cook. And I guess I was kind of surprised at the way that other people ate. I would go into homes and there would be one dish, no sides or nothing, tuna casserole, and there's your drink, and that's dinner. And my mom always had multiple sides with the meal. And so I never ran into a better cook in all the homes that I experienced. Well, on one particular day, I went across the street and spent the afternoon with this friend after school who lived right across from the elementary school. And he informed me about Kids Day. Oh boy, I didn't know about Kids Day. That was a new novel concept to me. And Kids Day in this family was a day that mom and dad would just randomly surprise the kids with a special day, all dedicated to the children. It might be a day when there would be a special event. I think there were always presents. They were surprise presents. Surprise, we got some presents for you. Maybe we're going to take you to the zoo and we're going to make you a special breakfast, or there's going to be a special meal, or we're going out to dinner. And the day is all going to be focused upon you, the child or the children. Well, that, I guess, and as I said, that was news to me. Now, at first I was rather upset. Our family doesn't celebrate Kids Day. And I tell you what, I figured that mom and dad were definitely behind on the presents and the special events. I mean, they're in debt. I mean, there's been, I'm like 10 years old, and so there's a good 10 years of Kids Days. They need to catch up on. I'm due some swag here. So after spending the afternoon, I proceeded to go home with this newfound information. and inform my mom, gonna inform my mom, gonna tell my mom that, we need to get up to speed here. There was an upgrade in order. Kids Day was a real thing, and that her and dad were seriously behind on the gifts. This bill on Kids Day was past due. You need to pay this bill now. Now, I came into the house, and it's embarrassing to think about it, but I was fully convinced. I was fully convinced I had an argument. I was fully convinced I was in the right. And here's the sad thing, I was convinced that my parents were in debt to me. I was convinced I was the one. I was convinced that they owed me. Now, they did virtually everything for me. I mean, they cooked, they cleaned. I was supposed to keep my room tidy and put my toys away and all of that sort of thing. But here was a family where my laundry was done for me. It would be folded and there on the bed, and then I would put it away. The meals were all prepared when I show up. Breakfast was ready in the morning, and when there was no school, lunch was there. Or if I wanted a lunch for school, it was made, or there was lunch money for school. I came home for dinner, and dinner was always on time, and it was amazing. And there was a roof over my head, and I didn't have to pay any of the bills, and I had transportation to school or to other things that I need to get to, and a chauffeur, and I had a maid, and I was convinced that they were in debt. Well, as I said, I came home and mom was working in the kitchen. In fact, mom was always working in the kitchen. In fact, I don't ever remember coming home and simply seeing her sitting down, napping, lying on the couch, or watching television. She was always cleaning, meal preparation, organizing, doing something. And when you came home, the house was always clean, and it smelled like it was clean. Well, we had a bit of small talk when I came home from school that day and from being with my friend to inform my mom about being overdue, past due on the kids' day. And I would say, "Hey, mom, this family, they celebrate Kids Day." And then I let her know what it was, informed her about what the process of Kids Day was, a day completely dedicated to kids and presents and events and things like that. Just a day devoted to the happiness of the children with free stuff and presents and swag and all of that sort of stuff. And my mom heard me out. Now, it's interesting the expressions that can be on your parents' face. It seems like my dad at times would have a puzzled, painful expression on his face when I did something foolish, and it was an almost where he couldn't speak, unable to get out the words, but you could tell from his eyes that what he was thinking was something like, "What were you thinking? Whatever possessed you to do that?" Or, "I am raising the dumbest kid on earth." I mean, that would be the expression on my dad's face. Now, mom lifted up her eyes from her work that afternoon, looked at me straight in the eye, had a kind of a tired and definitely an indignant look on her face, maybe kind of the type of expression Jesus might have at the judgment when he says to those on his left, the goats, "Depart from me." And mom said, "Mark, every day is Kids Day." Of course, I was disappointed. No gifts in my immediate future. Those gifts that I had received from either my last birthday or the last Christmas or both, they had to last throughout the entire year. I had to come up with enough storylines of how all the presents could play and work together to keep me entertained, which was a valuable lesson in itself. But then I thought, and that's always a good idea to pause and think. James 1:19 tells us to be slow to speak, quick to hear, and slow to wrath. Mom was right. Every day she cleaned for us, cooked for us. All my clothes, the roof over my head, my bed, all had been freely given to me. I did not have to pay for any of my meals or the daily maid service. I guess every day was Kids Day. I didn't think about it much after that and went out and enjoyed my present undeserved blessings. And later that night, the wonderful meal that she had prepared, and the clean clothes, and the bed in which I would soundly sleep. And the next morning, breakfast would be served on time and free of charge. In looking back, I'm eternally grateful that I grew up in a family circle rather than the one that my friend was in, even though his family had Kids Day. I had something far more valuable. I had parents who parented. I had parents who knew they were adults and I was a child. I had parents that were not afraid of telling me no. I had parents that had responsibility. I was surrounded by structure, accountability. I had an environment that was considering my future rather than my feelings at the moment. I had parents that were seeking to turn me into an adult, a responsible human being who did not always think about himself and who would do hard things in life. My friend might have received more molded and formed plastic in life, shiny, fancy things that later would break. But I was being given opportunities to form my character. Thank you, Mom and Dad, for not giving me Kids Day. This is Mark Dunagan with the Daily Answer. Until next time, we'll see you in the funny papers.